Siemano.
No, witam serdecznie. Hi, Aeddan.
Hi. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Luc Ampleman, Aeddan Shaw from the Institute of Geography and Spatial Management.
And Aeddan Shaw from the Institute of English Philology.
Just maybe before we start, just a bit the background about who we are in relation with what we're going to talk. Actually, we are friends since almost 20 years, but besides that, we are also teaching buddies, actually, which means that over the last 11 years, Aeddan, from late August to early July, we would meet actually once a week, 2 hours, sometimes 3 and 4 hours, just to talk about didactics, about pedagogy, about strategy of learning activities, and so on. We come together and say, oh, have a new issues. I want to teach that. What is the best way to accompany students actually through that? What are the skills? How do we evaluate that? Or I did something, didn't work well. What can I do next time? So we, over the last 11 years, we've done this on a very current basis. And actually, and of course, since 2022, AI appeared in the background, and that actually we start having questions and working on that as well.
Yeah, if you don't have a teaching buddy, I can heartily recommend it. Someone that you can kind of decompress with, you can share ideas. If something doesn't work in class, it's someone you can talk things through with. I mean, Luc is my inspiration in many things. The presentation that you'll see today is all of Luc. And I must admit, I've shamelessly stolen his use of 1920s and 1930s black and white silent films.
And from my side, actually, for I've been working with Aeddan. Something that I really appreciate is his experience. He's actually teaching people who are teaching people who wants to teach. So that makes him actually always 2 classrooms ahead of everyone. And he's also the best, actually, spirit catcher in a class. You put him in a class, and he sees and he listens. It catches everything. So I'm thankful for that.
Well, generous variance może być variance.
Hi, Marcin.
Also.
Okay.
I just have to mute you. Okay. So that's us. See.
So why does the digression today, Aeddan?
Well, I mean, Ivana made a really good point, which is we've just had the AI policy for the university has just been published, which is great. But also, I mean, the last 2.5 to 3 years, we've had lots of different opinions about AI and its perceived impact on the future of academia and academic teaching. There is the sense that it's a ticking time bomb, that it's only a matter of time before we're all out of a job. There's no need for universities anymore. To see it as a threat and only as a threat, I think is a bit of a misconception. I think we can also look at it as an opportunity. Now, there are some people who see it as an opportunity to use AI, and I'm not throwing any shade on that as an option, as a way forward. I think, and I see it as more of an opportunity to kind of reframe and revisit why we teach and why we assess students in the first place. I mean, just to very briefly kind of cover, I'm sure everyone's seen the AI regulations. For me, the most important point is actually in paragraph 4, section 3, where we're now going to be required to apply the requisite methods and the form of course credit and exams, which will correctly verify the competencies and the independent work of students, which is for me a godsend and extremely exciting. Yeah. With the introduction of the competency framework 15-16 years ago, it was very much a top-down imposed kind of system. So I think we didn't always know what to do with it. I'm a fan of competencies, and I think this is a really great opportunity for us to revisit competencies and to make them the focal point of how we assess our students. So the bottom line, and the thing to bear in mind throughout our presentation this morning, is that assessment is really a question of competencies, okay? When we're testing students, we're really seeing what they can do, yeah? So these are the knowledge, the skills, and the social competencies that we have in all of our syllabi, okay?
So by the end, actually, at the end of our session today, there are actually two expectations. We hope actually that when we are finished, that's just the beginning, and we're gonna suscitate this self-confidence and say, okay, AI actually is disturbing what we're doing, but yeah, we can redesign actually what we are doing, because we will do it in a way to accompany students to the competences. And the second thing is actually, we hope that they're going to have new ideas that are going to pop up. So a refreshing perspective, we say, oh, there's actually a few options I haven't think about beside testing and beside actually the traditional essay. And that could be good ways actually to assess the students.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I find really exciting is when you actually look at the competencies that you're supposed to have for your course, is thinking, okay, well, I don't need to do an essay. Yeah, I don't need to have a written exam. There is a different form of authentic assessment that can actually test all of these competencies. Oh, sorry, Luc, you were saying.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we're gonna have some comments about other form of assessment. If you think assessment, you think maybe a formative, a summative, but there are a lot beyond that. There's actually participative, there's authentic assessment, self-assessment, peer reviews, and so on. And actually, we shouldn't neglect other form and the feedback we give to the students. So by the end also of this session, there's actually learning outcomes, and we talk about competence, just about what we're doing right now, Aeddan. There's actually the knowledge is the need to focus on student actually competences and the skills to identify, generate genuine idea for assessment activities.
Yes. So we might have to test you later.
Yeah, there's a test at the end of this session, right?
Well, I would have thought so.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what you would expect. We have learning outcomes, we have competencies that we're hoping to foster and develop. So perhaps we need a test.
Oh yeah, I see a big exam actually.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see.
Okay, we'll see.
So for today's program, actually, we're going to go through 4 steps. We have some outrageous claims, and we're going to go to 8 of them. We're gonna suggest a few new horizons for assessment, actually, to improve, to actually suscitate the self-confidence. Some potential assessment activities, and we're really glad to talk about that actually in the last part, which is a non-conclusion. Actually, in this moment, we're going to listen to you after the test.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, just to clarify, these outrageous claims. So the outrageous claims are not necessarily ours. Since the advent of AI, there have been a lot of outrageous claims that have been made about AI and its implications for testing and assessment in general, and teaching as well. Yeah. So we're going to be looking at some of those outrageous claims, discussing them, seeing what we think. But at the same time, we're also going to use it as an opportunity to look at some outrageous claims that we think were made about traditional assessment methods and tools in the first place. So we'd like a kind of a chance to revisit some old outrageous claims and more new outrageous claims.
Perfect. So let me start with one for you, Aeddan. Actually, one with I would agree. AI means that we have to return to the rational testing. There's no way now. Students are probably dishonest. It's the only way to test them. It's
Can't trust them.
Yeah. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think this is definitely this is an outrageous claim. I mean, perhaps it's an understandable outrageous claim. I mean, in the UK, for example, the best statistics that we have at the moment is that 92% of students have admitted to using AI in some form in some part of their assessment. So that prompted kind of a panicked run and return to kind of proctored, in-person, closed book, written exams in the UK in a desperate attempt to try and kind of retain some kind of integrity and to maintain some kinds of standards. I see the motivation. But I think returning to traditional testing also kind of misses the point. Traditional testing, I think, really struggles to test competencies. Yeah. If you take a written exam, yeah, a traditional, let's say, multiple choice written exam, yeah, what kind of competencies can you test with that kind of assessment tool, Luc?
Basically knowledge, or actually memory.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're going to be testing knowledge in theory. You might not test all of the knowledge-based competencies for a particular course. But I would even question, are you really testing knowledge? Yeah. I mean, as you said, the key word is memory. Yeah. Now, if I have to remember a series of dates or, some elements of a theory or, famous people, if I'm just reproducing them or if I'm choosing them from a multiple choice list, yeah, or if I'm filling in a gap, I'm not really showing knowledge. I'm showing that I have a memory. Yeah. And as we know, it's a thing that students would then kind of swat up, prepare madly before an exam, and then promptly forget everything straight away afterwards. So is that really knowledge?
Fair enough. So what you're actually testing is actually the capacity on the 27th of June of one student to perform something exactly under this circumstance, but doesn't mean that you have measured all competences.
Exactly. So you've not measured those competencies, and I would say you've not even really measured their knowledge, that knowledge competence either, because it's not your ability to remember, it's your ability to do something with that knowledge. Yeah. So my background is in teacher training and teacher education. I could give my teacher trainee students a written multiple choice test on different theories of methodologies and things like that. But that doesn't show me that they can put those things into practice. Yeah. They might be able to remember the features of good instructions. Yeah. But can they actually give good instructions? That's an assessment tool that is never going to give me that answer. Yeah. Just to see, I popped in the chat, outrageous claim number 1. If I could ask those of you who are kind of listening, those of you in the audience, if you agree that AI means we need to return to traditional testing, can you give it a thumbs up? And if you think that actually, no, there are other options, there are different things that we could do, if you could give it a thumbs down. Okay. Okay, Luc, well, I've got an outrageous claim for you. This is one that I think a lot of people would agree with. How can we still use essays when ChatGPT can knock me out an essay in about 5-10 minutes, maybe? We can't verify as teachers whether the student has written this essay or if the essay's been written by ChatGPT. There are no reliable tools for kind of working that out. So we just need to kind of give up on the essay. No?
Oh, okay. Okay, I hear you on that. I understand your concern, but I have to check 2 things first.
Okay.
There's 2 things with the essays or the essay. First thing is that actually about the activity and the result, but the other thing is about the process. So probably if you have in mind the traditional descriptive or argumentative essay, 15 pages and so on, and what you are evaluating is the results as a document. Yeah, I think then, okay, I would agree that in that case, I don't know if his essay is dead, but it's probably on life support. But then if we talk about the essay as actually a process, but maybe that's something different. So first thing, just agree that actually an essay is not only a 15-page document. There's different form of essay. Actually, you could have a compare and contrast. You can have visual essay. You can have a poster, which is actually an essay, some kind of essay. Essay come from actually Latin French, which means to try on. And what you want to evaluate when a student is doing an essay is actually the way of trying to do something. And the way to evaluate is not the final result. What we would suggest, it is going through the semester, and every step students receive a feedback. So you say, students, you have to actually complete actually a compare and contrast between two. I do it, for instance, for a mean of transport. Students choose different means of transport. They compare the same means of transport in two different cities. But the first thing I say, okay, can you find me genuine information and tell me how did you find it? Students come back in class. They say, oh, I've done this and this and this. This is what I've, do you think that is actually really relevant information? And then feedback. Second thing, I can actually talk and compare those cases and actually discussion, feedback. So the second evaluation, and then can you put a graph comparing them, doing it in class, you can finish it later, but then feedback again. So what you evaluate is not the final result, is actually all the process. And it actually, if you can do it partially without, mostly without AI, or actually with AI Lite, or eventually adding some bit of AI. Plus, we're going to talk about that later.
We will.
But what you evaluate, they say is not dead, actually. It's just actually on life support, if you think about the traditional way of doing it, but it's obviously opening new possibilities in terms of evaluating competence. So he has 9 lives, actually.
Okay, so it's like a cat.
It's like a cat.
Okay, that explains why I don't like essays. I don't like cats either. Okay, so I think you've convinced me, Luc. You're basically saying that, you know, the essay, we traditionally look at the essay as a product, yeah, as a final thing which students are handing in, and we're using that product to see if they've demonstrated those competencies, yeah. But actually, the way they demonstrate those competencies is in the process of writing. So in gathering together a bibliography, constructing an abstract, coming up with the overall structure for their essay. So we can keep essays as an assessment tool, but we need to change the way that we assess that process.
Absolutely. I don't know anyone very excited actually to go through evaluations of 30 essays actually in 2, 3 days or 4 days or 1 week. Actually, it's creating. It's not really fair. It's difficult, and often students don't receive feedback for what they need.
Yeah, that's another thing that you said that I found very interesting, which is that the etymology of essay is related to trying. Yeah. But the way that traditionally we assess an essay, it's one and done. They hand it in, they get a grade, and then it's forgotten about. Yeah, that was certainly the case for my BA in the UK, where, you know, you would write 2, 4, 5,000 word essays per semester per course. You would hand it in, it would be given a mark, and that would be it.
Yeah.
And there's no trying there. Yeah, there's one attempt and then it's done. For me, it really should be, there should be the chance to get some feedback so you can improve, and you end up producing something that's so much better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I just put outrageous claim number 2 in the chat. If we could ask you as well to see if you agree that the essay is dead, or if you think that possibly it could be saved, then we disagree with this statement.
Okay, this one for you, Aeddan. It's all about prompting. We should train from now students to use AI, actually. And this should be actually maybe even the most important task, because that's where we are right now.
Yeah, I can see where that outrageous claim came from. You know, that by helping students to be better prompters, then they're going to fundamentally make ChatGPT better. Oh, no, hold on, that's not it. That we turn them into unpaid slaves for OpenAI. Okay, no. But seriously, I mean, my experience with this is fundamentally informed by the fact that I also work with IT developers. Now, fairly obviously, IT developers are at the kind of cutting edge of using AI and using LLMs, you know, whether vibe coding or, you know, using it to generate code and then correcting it themselves. And what they found very quickly, and what they've certainly been aware of for the last pretty much 2 years, is AI can code, but unless you know about coding, unless you know what it's doing well and what it's doing badly, then you can't actually check it or verify it or be confident that it's actually going to do what you want it to do. Yeah. So they're lucky in the sense that, you know, they did their degrees and they did their training in an era before AI. So they know how to code. They know the principles of how to make clean code, how to avoid spaghetti code, yeah, and how to make sure that things work. But if we only give students the ability to prompt, we're not giving them necessarily the competencies they need to verify whether or not what ChatGPT is producing is actually any good. So I would say that it's not actually something that we need to necessarily focus on. We need to focus on giving them the skills that they need to verify what AI can produce itself. Yeah, maybe an example of that. I mean, from my background as a CELTA assessor for Cambridge, so I have to go and assess different CELTA courses in different parts of the world. Sometime last year, I was looking at a lesson plan that someone had prepared, and it was using a framework which is called TTT, which is Test, Teach, Test, and the lesson plan was beautiful. Everything was there. Yeah, we had anticipated problems, we had materials, we had realistic aims for the lesson. Everything looked wonderful. Yeah, the problem really began when the person started teaching. Because it was very, very plain to see that they actually had no idea what they were doing. They didn't know how to actually teach. Because what they'd done is they got ChatGPT to make a lesson plan for them. And it was lovely, but they didn't have the skills to actually teach. Yeah. If you're an experienced teacher, you could take that lesson plan and you could think about the particular class that you're teaching, and you could modify it and adapt it, and you could make use of that. Yeah. But to be in that position, you need to be a trained teacher in the first place. So I would have to disagree with this one as well, Luc, I think.
Okay, you convinced me. But then, okay, so what you say is actually then we need to prevent students to use AI.
Well, good luck, maybe. Yeah, I don't think. By the way, there's another outrageous claim for everyone to react to if we agree or disagree with this one. Can we prevent students from using AI? I think when we look a little bit later at kind of AI proof, AI light, and AI plus, I think we'll see is that it's not necessarily about banning or forbidding or somehow trying to control or getting into an arms race with students in terms of finding out what's going on there. But really, I think it's more about de-incentivizing or creating assessment tools which actually you don't gain anything from using AI in that process. Yeah, that would certainly be the understanding behind AI proof. Yeah, that it's not that we're banning or we're trying to prevent students from using it, but that they gain nothing from doing it. Yeah, in my experience, students will use AI tools when they don't have enough time, when they're not engaged in the form of assessment that they're being given. And when they're under kind of time pressure for other reasons and other considerations. Yeah. So I would say, do we need to prevent students from using AI? No. But we need to make sure that use of AI doesn't impinge on their ability to demonstrate the competencies that the course is supposed to foster.
Hear that? Good.
Okay. So Luc, I think I've got an outrageous claim for you. Assessment should test course content. But hold on, this doesn't seem very outrageous. I think if we think about a history course or a geography course or a methodology course, we should be testing course content, no?
What does mean content?
Happy? Oh no, that's a different. That's good. That's content. Well, everything that we've done during the course. No?
Yeah. Okay. I would take a different stand on this. I would say assessment should test course competencies, but shouldn't test per se actually the content. So what you want is actually you want to bring to accompany students to be actually able to do things, actually understand things, react, so you want to transfer the competences. So what you're evaluating is competences, and actually sometimes those competences are beside actually the course content per se. For instance, collaborating. Do you want to create citizens that are able to collaborate? And actually sometimes it is one skills or one social skills that is evaluating in the learning outcomes. A good example of that actually is we're doing timeline with students. So that works well with actually a group of 9, a group of 18, a group of 36 that you pair and so on. You have actually a series of data about, it could be about music, it could be, I use it for mobility studies and so on, where students have actually to figure out where actually those events take place, one after another, checking if it goes before and after. And students are going to consult themselves. And this is actually a competence, actually, they're reflecting together. It's a bit, this action of reflecting is a bit outside of the content, but actually you are able to give feedback on what is happening. And that can be transferred in other courses. So assessment should test actually competences, not strictly the content of the course.
Okay, so it's what you can do. It's what you can do with that content, rather than testing your memory or your knowledge of all of it.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. You can test the content as well. It's very important, but shouldn't not absolutely only the content. So that's actually the nuance here.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
So did you send the to the audience the next
Yep.
arbitrator's claim? Oh, so summative assessment is essential. Everybody loves actually the final test.
Yep.
So what do you think of this?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a final test, don't you?
I mean, I wouldn't see education without actually the stressing final tests. So what about that?
Well, no.
Okay, enlighten me.
So, I mean, I think if you've opted for continuous assessment or formative assessment, you've already verified over, a whole semester whether or not students can do things. Whether or not they've demonstrated those competencies, whether they've got those skills, whether they have that knowledge. And they've had more than one chance, because oftentimes one issue with summative assessment is it's one written exam. It's one essay at the end of the year. And your whole grade rests on that. Now, obviously there are different mark schemes, so you can compensate. So you can say the final test is 50% of the grade. There are different ways of kind of counterbalancing that. But whether or not we need to have summative assessment, if we have other assessment tools along the way, I'm not convinced. Traditionally we have an exam session, but what if we only retain the exam session for students who haven't demonstrated those competencies through the course of the semester? So if you've shown consistently that you're able to do something, why do we need to then have another final test during the exam session?
Because you already accompanied them through actually a series of tasks. They have actually proven that actually they are able to do that. They have received feedback, and so in some cases you're going to have the summative actually, but it's not essential. I remember class where you don't have actually the summative test at the end for some specific courses, but I would conduct, for instance, a summary activity, sometimes a game or something, and you provide the feedback, and the students remember that actually more than actually any summative as an end evaluation for an instructional unit. That's what a summative actually evaluation is. Sometimes a good summary and come back discussion is actually more useful for the students. Sometimes you want to keep it. But one thing important is to have this summative assessment at the end, make sure that you have time to meet with the students and give the feedback. Because in many occasions, those summative is actually students just receive a mark and they don't know what's happening after that.
Okay. So, okay, well, I've got one for you, Luc. Every assignment should be graded. Do we need to give students a grade for everything they do?
That's quite grade obsessive. But I think that many students ask for a grade actually, and you want maybe to give this measurement, but actually no. Every assignment should receive feedback. Once again, competencies and feedback are the key words here. So every assignment should receive a feedback. Every student's performing something that actually is evaluated should receive a feedback, but not all of them should be graded. And there's different, actually, we know formative, actually ongoing assessment through a session. We know summative, which is actually end of an evaluation in an instructional unit or a course. But there's actually, you have the participative, actually assignment. You don't grade, you ask students, actually you have a checklist and say, students, come prove me that you have done this, and if you have done this, actually then you can go further. In geography, there's those terenówki. Often we ask students to be there, we discuss with them, okay, it's done, and we know actually you have this competence. Authentic assessment are not great. If a reference letter is a good example, it's the best assessment to receive, to give to someone, and sometimes you're going to give a reference letter to a student who hasn't actually have actually spectacular marks, but you say, oh, this is the students that make a difference in a class because she helps other students, they helps other students to be better, and they change the dynamic, and that's really, they receive feedback for that. So every assignment should receive a feedback, but you sometimes you don't want to grade everything, and you say, oh, well done, we agree with that, we pass you to the next step.
Okay, so not that every assignment should be graded, but every assignment should receive feedback.
Absolutely.
And that feedback could come from us, it could come from fellow students, from peer assessment, and it could also be in the form of self-assessment, so where students are able to kind of look and reflect on their work.
And you can discuss with them. A peer, don't neglect or don't actually peer reviews, peer assessment. They are really useful, and actually we can talk about that in the discussions. But there's actually documented sources about how it is useful actually in various fields.
Yeah, I think there's been research has shown that actually peer assessment can be more reliable and more objective than assessment by academic teachers.
Actually, it's difficult to say if actually head-to-head they can replace teacher assessment, but what we know it is, for instance, from the Learning Research and Development Center in Pittsburgh University, they have conducted those research for 20 years, and actually they show that when students actually receive feedback from peer, they get better than those who do not receive that. And if they receive the feedback from multiple peer reviewers, from their peers, actually they get better than actually just an instructor or an expert feedback. So that in terms of accompaniment and competences, here you are.
Lovely.
So the final one, standard test is fair. So this is about actually, you want to evaluate all students the same way, actually, and it's the only fair way of doing that is giving them the same thing, or evaluating them on the same basis.
I mean, this one might seem to be the most non-outrageous one of all. Yeah. When we think about testing and we think about standardized testing, if the test is the same for everyone, that's fair. Yeah. I've got a problem with this. Yeah.
Tell me.
Well, so the thing is, we're not actually all the same. Strange to say, we're all different. Yeah. We process the world in different ways. We express ourselves in different ways. And I think if you've only got one way of testing, if you've got this kind of cookie cutter approach to students, maybe you're not actually testing fairly, you're just testing a particular personality type. Yeah. So if you think about traditional testing, written exams, multiple choice, we're fundamentally testing and we're rewarding people who have a good memory. Yeah. Which I would say is not necessarily the same as the best students. Yeah. Maybe a quick kind of concrete example. Yeah. Here's an assignment that you wouldn't necessarily find at university, but perhaps in preschool. And we can see if we were grading this assignment, on their kind of use of color, or perhaps how kind of tidy and neat they've been when they've been doing things. But the fundamental competence is to show that young children are aware that trees go through a process in the autumn whereby the leaves change color, and then they eventually kind of fall off. And I think there are ones, especially towards the bottom right, where perhaps they haven't quite got that. There are ones in the top which I find terrifying because they're far too neat and tidy. But the one on the very far side of the picture, this is perhaps one that would fail. Yeah. Because it's completely different to all of the other ones. Yeah.
So they're not standardized.
Not standardized, no. But at the same time, this kid is also showing that they're aware that leaves are green, and then they become orange, and then they become yellow, and then they fall off.
So there's a knowledge of the chlorophyll breakdown through autumn.
They're familiar with well, they might not be familiar with chlorophyll at age 5, but I think they're definitely aware of that change in that process.
Yeah.
And so in a sense, they're demonstrating the same competence as the other children, but they're doing it in a different way. Yeah. So given the number of students, and that we have within the student body who perhaps are on an autism spectrum, who are perhaps with ADHD, yeah. If we're only assessing them and grading them in one particular way, we're doing them a disservice. Yeah. At the moment, one of the few provisions that we have for students with ADHD is to give them more time in an exam. Now, from my experience of friends with ADHD, the point is that you can be given a task to do, and if it's one that clicks with you, and if everything's flowing, you can do it in a third of the time that it would take someone else to do. But if things aren't clicking, if it's not flowing, if it doesn't work for you, all that extra time is going to do is going to draw out the pain and the suffering even longer. Yeah, it's not going to help you. So rather than giving more time, I think we need to really reflect on how can we get students to show us they've demonstrated these competencies in different ways.
So two things here, the standardization and also the adaptation. And this discussion reminds me of something, comparison between Finland and USA, for instance. In Finland, they didn't abandon standardized tests, and they have still a system of grading, but they took some distance with that. Although in the United States, it's quite used actually. And what we observe it is that if you have to do standardize, you tend to do things which are you can quantify. And actually, as in Finland, they're looking as well things that qualification. So, for instance, one competence you want, we're talking about feedback. One competence, are you able to receive feedback? Are you able to give feedback? You cannot quantify that, but you want to measure that. So that's actually, there's a lot of things with standardized tests that you cannot actually evaluate, which are really important when you when you accompany students. So, okay, well done for this one, Aeddan.
But I mean, also, it would be nice to come back in the discussion to Ivana's point in the chat about UDL. Yeah, that would be lovely to pick up on that in the discussion afterwards. And also misconceptions about ADHD and what ADHD is. Okay.
So we have those outrageous claims. Yep. Maybe a bit of optimism and a new horizon assessment or what. Actually, now we are dealing with AI. Now it is in the evaluation process, in teaching process, in education. What can we do from that? So once again, continuous assessment is actually based on multiple counters. That's the key.
Yeah, so I mean, just very briefly that, I think if we're assessing students regularly over the course of the semester, we're giving them different opportunities to show us, whether through active learning or through different assessment tools or formative assessment, that they've demonstrated these competencies. We can then verify at the end that they've actually genuinely developed and made progress. Yeah. The key about multiple encounters is that it's not enough that they have one chance to demonstrate a competence. Yeah. The way you get better at something is through repetition. Yeah. And so having the opportunity to do things more than once is perhaps key.
So the second one, we said actually we shouldn't teach only prompting to students, but actually we shouldn't throw the baby with the water out of the bath. So there's different way of integrating AI. Sometimes it's okay, don't touch it. Sometimes it is a little bit of it. Sometimes okay, let's get it more involved, but there is going to something to do. So this is the idea of assessment, actually proof, light, and plus. I guess we're gonna come back on this a bit later, right?
I think so. Yep, I think we also need to rediscover the art of feedback. Yep, I think in terms of giving students more feedback if we want them to improve. I think it's a reassessment or a realignment of the work of the academic teacher. Yeah, so we're less into assessing and giving final grades and more in terms of giving students feedback on how they can be better. Yeah, just one quick example. I could observe someone teaching, and I could give them a mark of 77%. Yeah, and that wouldn't make them or help them be a better teacher. Yeah. Instead, if I observe someone and I give them feedback, then I would point out some things that they've done well, and I'd give them perhaps some suggestions or some ideas for things that they could experiment with or they could do differently next time. So I think feedback is key.
Using technology, but being prepared to go analog. That's something you say to students, and actually we should talk about ourselves. I don't know if you remember, Aeddan, but last May there was this big blackout in Spain for a few days, a few hours. Actually, things wouldn't work. I had a student that couldn't make bank transactions because actually everything cut. This student from Spain, and just actually that's something we want to be aware of. It is that AI maybe won't be always there at the very moment we need it, and actually both for crisis reason or for actually economic reason. Actually, there's different kind of access and privilege and so on. So what we want to address in a classroom is, okay, this is something that exists, but actually, what would you do if you are competent without that? And actually, that's actually the way to approach it. So we want students as well to be prepared for going analog anytime.
Lovely. Okay, maybe let's get to the meat very quickly in terms of what we're really proposing and what we're really suggesting is in terms of different types of assessment activities. Yeah. So, I mean, if we think about, we have kind of traditional testing, we're proposing three alternatives: AI proof, AI light, AI plus. AI proof, as we've indicated, its AI use is essentially prevented not through explicitly banning it, but by basically removing any incentive to use AI in the first place. AI light is when you can use AI and students can use AI, but it doesn't affect the competencies that are being tested. Yeah. So, for example, if you're giving a presentation, you could use you could use AI tools to make a more engaging and exciting and beautiful presentation, but it shouldn't actually affect the content. You wouldn't be able to use the content to brainstorm ideas, for example. Yeah. And then AI plus, this is kind of more where we're really looking into the process of what students are doing. So AI could possibly be used, but our evaluation doesn't really concern the AI itself. Okay, but maybe some kind of concrete examples, I think.
Coming back to the essay, for instance.
Hmm.
So what would be a good example of AI proof?
So, I mean, if we think of the original essay as it's this final product that we already discussed, an AI proof approach would be using writing rooms. So writing rooms, you would essentially break down the different components of the essay from bibliography, abstract, structure, paragraphing. And each week you would meet with the students and they would be doing the task there and then with the role of the teacher to be to support them and to help them. Yeah. This is something I've used writing rooms for both BA and MA seminars. And you do a quick tour de table where people say what are their objectives for that particular day. And then my role is to help them and assist them. And so thanks to that, all of the BAs and MAs that I've supervised over the last 3 years have not been written with AI tools. AI Light, so this is where you could still use a writing room, but if language is not a competence that we're assessing and we're testing, then, for example, students could use something like Grammarly. Yeah. AI Plus is a bit more extreme. This is where we say, okay, we're not interested in the physical process of writing, but whether or not students have the competencies and the awareness of what makes a good abstract, what makes a good bibliography. Yeah. So in that case, AI would essentially generate an abstract and students would need to annotate, validate, and correct it. Yeah. You could even have them generate an entire thesis and they would need to do the same, whereby they're essentially showing they're demonstrating their knowledge of what makes a good thesis, yeah, what makes a good academic piece of work by verifying something that AI has produced. Yeah.
Oh, the summative final test. Any suggestions or final actually learning activities as a summative?
So first things first, I think it needs to be authentic. Yep. So whether we're training lawyers, whether we're training doctors, whether we're training teachers, architects, the final test I think could be replaced by something more authentic. Yep. So for example, as you know, I'm interested in training teachers. I don't necessarily need them to remember, names and theories and details like this. I need to see if they can plan a lesson. Yeah. So in the same way that if I was working with architecture students, I'd be more interested if they know how to make sure that a building isn't going to collapse than different architectural styles. So AI proof would be essentially, a kind of a system where you give them materials for it and then they plan a lesson there and then. An AI light version of that would be to give them an AI generated lesson plan and a group profile and ask them to correct it. And an AI plus one would be students would use AI to generate lesson plans for a group profile that you've given them. Yeah. And then they would need to annotate it and correct it from there. Yep.
So what you observe is the correction, adjustment, and attention to actually what works, what doesn't work.
Exactly. And homework. I think this is perhaps a major consideration, is that we don't know if students are actually going to do the work themselves, or if they're going to get AI to do it for them.
So what about those takes home actually?
One thing I do for AI proof, you're essentially leveraging the bonds between students. So jigsaw reading. One of the reasons why students will use AI is because they have too much work to do anyway. So instead of giving students 3 texts to read for homework, 1 per student, but then different students have it, they then come together, they share their ideas with people who've read they've read the same texts, and then they share with people who've read different texts. You create bonds and a sense of guilt, which stops them cheating. An AI light option would be to use something like Notebook LM, which will record a podcast for you. You basically input the text that you want, and then it will make a podcast. I would then get students to listen to the podcast and then work out what it doesn't mention and perhaps why that's important.
So the blind spots of
Yeah. Again, an AI plus option would be, an AI generated PowerPoint. on the 3 texts that we've asked them to read. And then we would get students to basically do a quiz at the beginning of the lesson to see what information was missing. So they would still need to read those texts, but we're giving them something from AI to kind of help them there. Yeah. Okay. By means of an unconclusion, as we're wanting to have some discussion,
Once
it's
again,
all about competencies. This is really laid out in the AI policy from the university. We really need to be focused on competencies and testing and seeing that students can demonstrate them without the use of AI and independently.
And what I like with that, actually, we maybe start actually evaluating more and more actually understanding and social skills as well. Competence now, there's a lot actually. What we want to do is accompany students to validating the content. It's not only prompting, but it's what appears is really good. Capturing human experience, that's something that AI is not doing. For instance, it's doing street interviews with people, the voice of people. That's actually something. So you want maybe to capture things that AI doesn't do. And negotiating and questioning meanings. Students can generate, we can generate AI information and data, but actually what we want is to make sure that we can question and negotiate actually the meanings of that.
Yeah, and we need competencies as well as teachers and scholars and educators. So accompanying students through genuine feedback, kind of more engaging, making greater use of classroom activities, meaningful assessments. Yeah, and again,
did you mention feedback?
I think we mentioned.
Right,
feedback.
I think we mentioned.
Feedback.
Perfect.
I think we mentioned competencies a few times as well. Yeah, maybe just to finish, like how and when AI was used for this presentation, it wasn't. Hopefully, we've demonstrated or we've helped to develop these kind of learning outcomes. But as we said, it's all about multiple encounters. We could give you a final test.
Do we do that?
No, I think we'd rather have a conversation. But we can see more or less from the reactions in the chat that I think we've certainly for kind of the perspective on and the importance of competencies has been kind of achieved. If you'd be interested in kind of reaching out.
Yeah, we'd like to hear from you, and we need to hear from you. We want to continue to work on this, and actually your feedback actually would be very welcome, especially if you have developed new evaluation activities due to AI. Please let us know. We want to know about that. On the other side, are you struggling with find efficient assessment tools? Say, oh, I don't know how to deal with that. I have this class, and it's difficult actually, and so we want to hear from you as well. One thing which is in the blind spot of our actually presentation, Aeddan, it is large group. So if you are teaching a group of 300 students, 400 students, and this is something we are not touching, and but actually we're interested actually to listen to you. And if you're coming from very different field, law, cognitive science, musicology, or things that we want to hear from you as well. So that's actually our call today.
Lovely. Thank you very much, everyone, and looking forward to a fruitful discussion. If you want to contact us, details are in the presentation, which we'll share as well.